So I've been wanting to sell the Scott foil for a long time now. The problem is every time I get back on that bike, I'm like, I can't sell it. It's so much fun to ride. It's stiff, it's light, it's aero. It's all the things that you want in an unapologetic race bike. But now I think I finally have a reason to sell it, and that reason's behind me right here. No, this is not my 2025 team bike. This is the Tevelo Aero, which I've been putting it through its paces in a variety of riding conditions. I've spent hours in my garage building it up from scratch. I have a lot of opinions about this, but one thing right off the bat is this is not a paid advertisement. This is not a sponsored piece of content. Tevelo Aero doesn't even know I'm making this video, but I think that this might be an attractive option for you if you're in the market for a new race bike. So hang in there, let's dive into it. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is put a magnifying glass, put a spotlight on the things I do not like about this bike. And a lot of those come up in the building process. You know, that's one thing you guys probably know about these Chinese bikes is they don't come pre-built. It comes as a frame, bars in a box, and you have to build it up. So how did I build mine up? I bought brand new Ultegra Di2 12 speed, 1,400 bucks, good price, except the crank. We're gonna talk about that in a little bit. Rotor, actually we'll talk about it now. It has power. The reason I swapped it out, it has power. It has a 54 tooth big ring, so a little bit more speed. 165 millimeter crank arms, which are incredibly important for crit racing. And that's the reason I swapped it out with the stock Ultegra crank set. But everything else is stock Di2. Okay, so when you're building a bike, it reveals any shortcomings in the manufacturing or the QA/QC process. And I'm gonna point out a couple of things that I noticed when I was building this bike up. And we're gonna start back here at the rear brake assembly. The mounting bolts do not fit. And I thought I was missing some mounting bracket or something because the standard kit that comes with the Shimano build, the bolts didn't fit. So I contacted Tevelo, I was like, surely I'm missing something. And they said, nah, just go ahead and cut the bolts. A bit strange, so be prepared for that. I mean, you're gonna have to take a hacksaw to the bolts that come with the build kit, and you're gonna miss that little insurance policy. That rear bolt has a little nub at the end of it that acts as a fail-safe in case you strip them out and the brake is falling off. There's like one last little insurance policy. You're gonna miss that when you cut the bolts, and that's kind of inconvenient. That was the first quirk that I had with the build. The second thing is up here. This wedge style seat post clamp. It says, I don't know if you can read it, it says 5 to 6 Newton meters. That's weird. That's not very specific. So I went to 5. I erred on the side of caution and it slipped. That's a bummer. It causes scratching on the seat post. That was inconvenient. It kind of ruins your ride. You have to get off and figure it out. So then I went up to 6, slipped again. That frustrated me. I eventually went to 6 with carbon paste, which is really like the last straw. I mean, I could go higher than 6. That seems sketchy. But that solved the problem. You can see I have some tape here to make sure that we're not slipping anymore. Now, this is not a problem unique to Tevelo. This is like kind of a shortcoming of this technology, which is used in a lot of different bikes. The Cervelo I had is the team bike. The Soloist had the same problem. So not that big of a deal. The problems come in this area. Okay, sorry for the interruption, but we're gonna take a brief moment to talk about bicycle.com, which is today's video sponsor and a brand that you may see more and more on this channel moving forward, because I've decided in 2025, I'm taking on fewer but higher quality sponsors, and that starts with Bicycle, because I think they provide an excellent service that solves a fundamental problem in our industry right now, which is how cost prohibitive it is to get into the sport. This video right here is a good example of that. 5,000 bucks is a budget option. It's true, but that's a lot of money. And you might be tempted to go to the used market. In years past, the used market was you go to Craigslist, you meet somebody in the park, you're on Facebook Marketplace, you have a friend of a friend. It was the Wild West. As the seller, you don't know if you're gonna get a wad of fake money. As the buyer, you don't know if you're gonna get a lemon that's been in a crash. Bicycle solves this problem because what they essentially do is they connect the buyer with the seller. They make sure that both parties are happy. There are protections on either side. And it opens this marketplace not just to people within your local area, but nationwide. So you know you're getting a very competitive price. Now, the last thing I want to talk about is fees, because you're probably wondering how much does all of this cost? And it's less than you think. The reason is Bicycle doesn't have to hold space for the bikes and components in some big warehouse somewhere. They simply facilitate the sale and the logistics of the bike going directly from the seller to the buyer with packaging included, making it a very cost-effective way to sell your bike worldwide. And good news is, if you're a fan of this channel, code NORCAL30 gets you an additional 30% off seller protection fee. In order for you guys to understand what's available, I found this bike that I'll link in the description. These are the types of prices that you can find if you're patient. So thanks again. Now back to the video. First of all, let's talk about how good it looks first. It looks so clean. The bars and the stem look so good, but there are some problems in here, and I'm gonna talk about it, and I'll be as brief as I can. The first one is the steerer plug. Now, I don't have good B-roll, but Peak Torque talked about this, and I'm gonna borrow some of his footage right now. The steerer plug is fragile and kind of strange. Just be very careful with it, and you will drop the bolt down one of the fork blades and have to turn the bike upside down and retrieve it. That's almost certainly gonna happen, and those O-rings are very fragile, so be careful. And on the note of steerers and plugs, if you're gonna cut your steerer, leave yourself 5 millimeters. Actually, let's take a step back. Cut your steerer, please. I see people with this honking chimney coming out the top of their bike. That is a liability. That is a rib cracker. First of all, it doesn't look good. Also, like I said, it's really unsafe. And the third reason is if your steerer is stuck out up like here, the plug isn't doing its job. The steerer plug, not only does it act as a point of opposition when you're clamping down the bolt and preloading the bearings, it also acts as a counter force to when you're tightening these stem bolts. And if the steerer plug is up here, now your stem bolts are tightening against a hollow tube of carbon. That is potentially very, very dangerous. But like I was saying, 5 millimeters, always leave yourself 5 millimeters. A, it's easier to measure. You just draw a line, you just install everything, clamp it down, get your preload, draw a line, and then that's where you cut. And now that 5 millimeters acts as the point where you can tighten and preload those headset bearings. But the other reason is not all stems are the same thickness. So if I were to swap out this bar and stem, which I never plan on doing, more on that in a second, if I get something that is like Zip has chonky ones, it's a little bit thicker, you're not SOL, right? And then the final reason is I want as much of the steerer being grabbed by as much of the stem as possible. If you were to cut this off, yeah, it looks a little cleaner. You don't have this 5 millimeters, but technically you're cutting it 5 millimeters below, and you're not getting as good clamping against the steerer. I hope that makes sense. That's one of the reasons I always tell people, just leave 5 millimeters. You'll see a lot of pros and stuff even do this. It's not that big of a deal. The main problem though with the build, sorry, we went a little sidetracked there. The main problem has to do with routing these internal cables. You'll see clean on the front end, not a cable to be seen, right? That was not without its challenges. So the first one is we have cables coming up through this D-shaped steerer, making its way through the headset bearings. There are problems there. This is not unique to Tevelo. I shouldn't say problems, just you're gonna have to kind of fight the cables. They're rigid, right? To make them make this first bend right here. But the real problem comes when you are routing them through the actual handlebars into the brake hoods. And the problem is the hole on the handlebars is so small, you are gonna fight. And before you guys come at me in the comments, I have the routing kit where you can route the cables and there's a magnet or a plunger sort of thing on the end and you can pull it out. I have all that. It's too big to make your way through that port. So headlamp in your garage, screaming at your bike with a pick in one hand, and you're gonna be frustrated like I was. But once you get it, it's really clean. I just don't ever want to have to fight with that ever again. And when it comes time to change the cables on here, I'm gonna have to get real clever with some Gorilla Tape and, you know, pulling new cables through as I'm removing old cables, that sort of thing. So those are my main comments about the build. Now you'll notice the wheels are the Dura C50s and the tires, Continental GP 5000s. This is on purpose. I have wheel sets that I like much better than this set, but these are the wheels that I've been using on my Scott. And I just finished, right before I finished building this bike, I just finished a big camp that I did on the Scott. So I swapped the same wheels to this bike in order to get a fantastic point of comparison, isolating things just to the frame. And I'll tell you guys right now, at half price, this build, by the way, is about 5,000 bucks. you would be hard pressed to tell a difference in the way these two bikes feel. The Stavello is a very high performance, twitchy, stiff, aero, lightweight race bike. Speaking of weight, they both weigh about the same. It's 16.5 to 16.75 pounds, whatever that is in kilos. I'll put it on the screen right now. So it feels the same, weighs the same. Does it go as fast? Good question. Well, of course I did some testing. I went out and I used my traditional method, same power, same course, same position on the bike, same wheels, same tires, same everything. I swapped out just the bike, just the frame, and the difference between the Stavello and the Scott is within the margin of error. I'll put the results on the screen right now. So the only difference is it's like $5,000 cheaper. So that's why I think could be a very attractive option for you folks. Okay, so it feels the same, it goes just as fast, it's the same weight. It's just $5,000 cheaper. So then who's this bike for? At first I thought, this is in a class of its own. You can't buy this performance at this price point. You're looking at something that's closer to $10,000 or $12,000. Well, not so fast. I did a little digging and I found this Canyon CF SLX 7 or something, I wanna say, which can be had for about the same price as this build that I have behind me in the Stavello. So why buy one versus the other? There might be other options, by the way. It's not just the Canyon. Pre-built versus custom build is really what it comes down to. I got this bike just the way I want it, right? I can choose the wheels, I can choose the tires, I can choose the group set, and I can make sure things like the handlebars are the width I like, 38 millimeters, 120 reach. Those are very important to me. The crank, we talked about 165 millimeter crank arms, incredibly important for crit racing. Those options may not be available to you if you're buying a pre-built like the Canyon. Now, if you can find the pre-built with all of the features and the specs that you want, I say jump on it, because building a bike isn't for everybody. And that is the drawback. If you're building something like this, I think it's an attractive price point, and I think you get everything you want, but you have to build a bike, and it can be complicated, especially with the modern disc brakes and the hydraulic and all of that stuff. So I hope this video helps. I'm gonna link everything I talked about down in the description. And if you guys want to see more bikes, I have a team bike coming, so get subscribed. I'll make a whole video about that as well. Once I put the requisite, few hundred miles on it, I build it up. I'll let you guys know how that goes. I'll tease it for now. I'm not going to tell you what it is. So get subscribed. Thanks for watching, guys. Catch you in the next one.